Good afternoon. This is Sean Golden with Golden Golding, here to discuss a very common question. You see it in the movies all the time, right? Just claiming the Fifth Amendment when the government or the fuzz are going to ask you questions that you're not comfortable responding to. Is it really that simple? Do you just claim the Fifth and that's the end of it? No, right? But let's go through the basics of how it works, right? So the idea behind the Fifth Amendment for purposes of this short presentation is the right against self-incrimination, right? You can't be forced to testify against yourself. Now, the idea of the Fifth Amendment can work in both civil and criminal, right? Generally, though, there are certain requirements, and with tax matters, it gets a little more complicated. Why? Because oftentimes, the way that an IRS criminal investigation is sparked, or the catalyst, is the civil audit. The agent believes the taxpayer may have committed some sort of criminal tax violation, criminal fraud, false filings, evasion, things of that nature. Especially things like eggshell audits, where or even reverse eggshell audits, where there's an issue of criminality kind of permeating through the entire audit, right? What can the taxpayer do to avoid incriminating against themselves? So the first thing to keep in mind is that it's not some sort of blanket Fifth Amendment, you claim it and that's it. You know, in the movies, right, person's in an interrogation, they go, I claim the Fifth, and everyone stops talking and goes home because he or she claimed the Fifth. It doesn't work that way in real life. Another example of trying to claim blanket is when like a summons shows up from the special agents, and you're like, I'm not responding to it, it violates my Fifth Amendment. The idea is it's basically like a per question scenario, and there has to be a real and substantial hazard of incrimination, and then the question being asked is going to lead to something incriminating. If you're in an actual criminal investigation, well, you know, that pretty much speaks for itself, right? If you're sitting down with some special agents and they're asking you questions, well, they're asking you questions because it's a criminal investigation, right? It doesn't mean you're necessarily under arrest yet, but when the special agents that represent the criminal faction of the IRS start asking you these questions, well, then the idea is they want to push it into a criminal prosecution, an indictment, or a complaint being filed. When you're in a civil audit, it's a little bit different, right? Because a lot of times you could just be nervous, you could just be concerned, like an eggshell audit where you, the taxpayer, you know something, but you don't want to tell them. You can't intentionally misrepresent, you can't intentionally omit. What they know or don't know is up for grabs, and so you just start spouting out, well, I claim the Fifth. You know, chances are you're letting them know, well, wow, you're taxpayer concerned about something criminal. The auditor or examiner may not have even known anything. So there's that very fine line between claiming the Fifth and then just being kind of nervous and putting out there information or the idea that you did something criminal where the agent may not already have that kind of information sufficient to refer it over to the special agents or for the special agents to accept it. Some considerations involving the Fifth Amendment for situations involving tax. In general, even if it's not tax, it's waived if it's not claimed, right? So if you don't claim the Fifth Amendment, then it can be waived. Courts have ruled that. So if you're unsure and you really want to claim it, then you can claim it. That way you can at least say that you claimed it, right? Even if you claim it, like for example, if you get a summons from the special agents and you try to denounce and say, well, I claim the Fifth, there's things they can do, of course. That's not the end of it. They can try to apply for a compulsion order depending on whether or not a summons was issued, and then that can lead to the taxpayer having to kind of compartmentalize when they can use it and when they can't, when it'll be effective, when it's not. An example, if usually a name is not going to be covered under the privilege. Someone goes, well, who told you that? And you go, well, I claim the Fifth. They're not asking necessarily any information, underlying information about what was discussed, but normally someone's name, things of that nature, can't always be covered. One interesting recent case was in tax court involving a Schedule B case, and in that case, the IRS wanted to issue penalties, and because the taxpayer had provided Schedule B for a tax return is used for interest, dividends. It also has the foreign account component, but here the taxpayer had identified certain information regarding the amount of the dividends and the interest, but didn't want to include the name of the institution that generated it, and when pushed, they said, no, I'm claiming the Fifth because it might incriminate me. I'm not going to self-incriminate myself. And actually, the tax court agreed and said it just the amount of information in there regarding the amount of dividends and interest paid was sufficient, substantially correct in order to avoid certain penalties. So the thing to keep in mind is it's not exactly sure how different courts are going to rule on certain issues, but if you're concerned that you're going to self-incriminate yourself, you should not. You should always speak to an attorney, reach out to a board-certified specialist to work with you. If you've done something potentially criminal in the offshore realm, you may want to consider doing the voluntary disclosure program, which is for people who are willful or just can't certify under penalty of perjury. If you're not willful, if you are in that boat, you don't qualify for any of the non-willful programs like streamlined delinquency, reasonable cost, things like that. We have lots of free information available on our main website and our sub-websites. You can always reach out, schedule a reduced fee initial consultation if you think it's appropriate and it's something that we handle at our firm. Again, my name is Sean Golden with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.